The Middle East, a region shaped by ancient rivalries and modern power struggles. Today, Israel and Iraq stand at the heart of a conflict that reverberates far beyond their borders. Their relationship is not just about geography, but about the forces that shape global security and economics. Tensions between them signal shifts in regional power and the risk of wider wars. In an era of drones and cyber attacks, the distance between Jerusalem and Baghdad has all but vanished. What happens here affects millions and can destabilize the world. We must look closer, not just for the headlines but because the stakes are too high to ignore. In this report, we'll cut through the noise to uncover the real story behind the Israel-Iraq dynamic. We'll explore the history, the politics, and the human cost of this enduring conflict. Join us as we reveal why this flashpoint matters now more than ever. To understand today's crisis, we must revisit the 20th century. Iraq was a key player in the Arab world's opposition to Israel's creation in 1948, forging a legacy of confrontation. Iraqi forces fought Israel in the Six-Day and Yom Kippur Wars, cementing a history of direct conflict. The 1981 Israeli airstrike on Iraq's Osirak reactor was a turning point, deepening Iraqi resentment and fear. Saddam Hussein's regime intensified this hostility, using anti-Israel rhetoric to rally support. During the 1991 Gulf War, Saddam launched Scud missiles at Israel, aiming to fracture the US-led coalition. Israel, under US pressure, did not retaliate, but the trauma lingered. After Saddam's fall, the threat shifted. Pro-Iranian militias in Iraq now worry Israeli security officials. The past is not just history, it shapes every missile, every statement, every move today. The echoes of old wars still reverberate in Jerusalem and Baghdad. The Israel-Iraq story stretches back millennia, rooted in the ancient Jewish community of Babylon. For centuries, Jews thrived in Iraq, contributing to its culture and economy. This coexistence unraveled in the 20th century as nationalism and the Zionist movement rose. The 1941 Farhud pogrom shattered Jewish security in Baghdad, fueling mistrust and fear. The creation of Israel in 1948 triggered war and persecution, forcing most Iraqi Jews to flee. Operation Ezra and Nehemiah airlifted over 130,000 Jews to Israel, leaving behind homes and history. This exodus was a trauma for both sides, uprooting a community and deepening mutual grievances. For Israelis of Iraqi descent, it's a story of loss. For Iraq, it's a wound tied to the broader Palestinian tragedy. Ancient ties were severed, replaced by the realities of modern conflict. The shared heritage became a narrative of dispossession and animosity. During the Cold War, Israel and Iraq became pawns in a global superpower rivalry. Iraq, backed by the Soviet Union, armed itself against Israel, America's key ally in the region. The arms race and ideological divide turned local disputes into proxy wars. Saddam Hussein's Ba'athist regime made anti-Israel rhetoric central to its legitimacy. Negotiation was off the table. The conflict became an existential struggle. The 1981 Israeli strike on Osirak and Saddam's 1991 Scud attacks on Israel were flashpoints in this ideological war. Each confrontation was amplified by superpower interests, raising the stakes far beyond the region. The Cold War hardened positions, making peace nearly impossible. These battles were not just military, they were symbols of a deeper ideological clash. The legacy of this era still shapes the conflict today. The 2003 US invasion of Iraq toppled Saddam but unleashed new dangers. The power vacuum was filled by sectarian militias and extremist groups, many backed by Iran. Iran's influence grew, arming Shia militias that now threaten Israel from within Iraq. The conflict shifted from state-on-state to a shadow war of proxies and precision strikes. Israel began targeting Iranian-backed groups in Iraq and Syria, escalating the regional conflict. The battlefield is now borderless, defined by drones, intelligence, and long-range strikes. Iraq's government struggles to control militias and balance between Iran and the US. Israeli strikes violate Iraqi sovereignty, but Baghdad lacks the power to stop them. Iraq has become a volatile arena for a wider regional struggle. The Israel-Iraq conflict is now part of a larger explosive confrontation with Iran. The conflict between Israel and Iraq exists on a global chessboard, where superpowers like the United States and Russia have destabilizing consequences. Washington's goal has been to ensure Israel's security and maintain the stable flow of oil. This places American troops in the line of fire. Meanwhile, Russia has reasserted its influence, challenging American dominance. This superpower competition turns the region into a theater of geopolitical rivalry. The people of the region are pawns in a great game played by powers far away. To understand the modern conflict between Israel and Iraq, one name is most important: Iran. Following the 2003 invasion, Tehran saw a golden opportunity in the chaos of its neighbor, transforming the country into a crucial pillar of its regional strategy. Iran has armed, trained, and funded a powerful array of Shia militias. For Israel, this represents an existential threat. The historical buffer zone that once separated Israel from Iran has effectively vanished. This has allowed Tehran to pursue its long-term goal of establishing a land bridge stretching from Tehran through Baghdad and Damascus to Beirut. This corridor acts as a military highway, enabling the seamless transfer of advanced weapons, all aimed at Israel. Israeli jets and drones have reportedly carried out hundreds of strikes across Syria and, more controversially, inside Iraqi territory itself. The proxy groups in Iraq have become a direct tool for Iranian retaliation. Drones and rockets have been fired from Iraqi soil towards targets in Israel, turning Iraq into a launching pad for Iran to strike its enemies. The government in Baghdad finds itself in an almost impossible position, trapped between powerful and competing forces. On one hand, the United States remains a crucial partner, providing essential support in the fight against ISIS remnants and acting as a vital economic and diplomatic link to the Western world. American troops remain in the country at the official invitation of the Iraqi government. On the other hand, Iran wields immense influence, not just through its proxy militias, but also through powerful political allies woven into the Iraqi parliament and government ministries. This creates a perpetual and paralyzing tug-of-war for the soul of the Iraqi state. This internal division renders the Iraqi government incapable of asserting full control over its own territory and foreign policy. When pro-Iranian militias launch attacks against American or Israeli targets from Iraqi soil, the government in Baghdad is often powerless to stop them. These groups operate with a significant degree of autonomy, possessing their own command structures, intelligence networks, and heavy weaponry. They often defy the orders of the official Iraqi military command, acting instead on directives from Tehran. This weakness means that Iraq's official policy of neutrality is frequently violated, making the country an unwilling arena for other nations' conflicts. Every Israeli airstrike on Iraqi territory, while aimed at Iranian proxies, presents a severe crisis for Baghdad. Each strike is a blatant violation of Iraqi sovereignty, fueling public anger and empowering anti-American politicians who demand the immediate expulsion of all foreign forces. The government is forced to issue condemnations it cannot back up with action, exposing its own fragility. It cannot protect its skies from Israeli incursions, nor can it rein in the militias that provoked those incursions in the first place. This constant cycle of attack and counterattack further erodes the legitimacy of the Iraqi state, pushing it ever closer to collapse. Ultimately, Iraq is paying a heavy price for a conflict that is increasingly not its own. The historical animosity with Israel has been co-opted and absorbed into the larger regional struggle between Iran and its adversaries. The central challenge for any Iraqi leader is to reclaim the country's sovereignty, to build a state strong enough to control all armed groups within its borders, and to pursue an independent foreign policy that serves the interests of the Iraqi people. Until that happens, Iraq will remain a fractured battlefield, its stability held hostage by the political ambitions and military actions of its powerful neighbors and their global patrons. The current escalation was ignited by an event that sent shockwaves across the Middle East. On October 7th, Hamas launched an attack from Gaza into Israel, an operation they named Al-Aqsa Flood. This resulted in deaths and the capture of hostages, shattering Israel's sense of invincibility and triggering a military response. This event acted as a catalyst, activating Iran's network of allies, the axis of resistance. As the war intensified, these groups opened new fronts, seeking to stretch Israeli military resources. The conflict quickly spiraled into a broader regional confrontation, exposing the shadow war between Israel and Iran. Attacks from multiple directions became part of a coordinated campaign of pressure. The October 7th attack blew the lid off a regional powder keg, and the front in Iraq was now active. The ripple effect from Gaza had reached Baghdad, transforming Iraq into a critical front line. Following the October 7th attack, the Islamic resistance in Iraq, a coalition of Iran-aligned militias, declared American bases in Iraq and Syria legitimate targets. Using suicide drones, rockets, and missiles, the militias launched over 150 attacks in months. This campaign was designed to inflict casualties and exert political pressure on Washington. For the militias, it reinforced their image as defenders of Iraq. For Iran, it was a masterful use of proxy warfare, avoiding direct confrontation. The Iraqi government was rendered helpless, caught in the crossfire. The conflict plunged the nation back into a cycle of violence. The threat from Iraq was no longer just theoretical or confined to attacks on American bases. As the conflict escalated, the Islamic resistance in Iraq began to directly target Israel itself, demonstrating a surprising and honestly alarming long-range strike capability. From launch sites deep within Iraqi territory, hundreds of miles from the Israeli border, they started firing cruise missiles and sophisticated drones towards key Israeli cities and strategic sites. While many of these projectiles were intercepted by Israeli air defenses, or by Allied forces in Jordan and elsewhere, some managed to get through, causing damage and, well, really sowing panic. The southern port city of Eilat, in particular, became a frequent target. This marked a significant strategic shift. Previously, the threat from Iraq was seen as indirect, mainly about the flow of weapons to Syria and Lebanon. Now, Iraq itself had become a direct launching pad for attacks against the Israeli homeland. This was made possible by Iran's steady supply of advanced military technology, including long-range Shahed drones and precision-guided missiles, which they had transferred to their Iraqi proxies. The militias were no longer just a ground force. They had become a formidable aerial threat, capable of striking deep inside Israel and opening up a new eastern front that the Israeli military had to actively defend against. The psychological impact of these attacks on the Israeli public was, frankly, profound. For decades, Israelis had lived with threats from their immediate neighbors, but the idea of missiles arriving from as far away as Iraq was a new and unsettling development. It reinforced a sense of being besieged from all sides, a feeling that the entire region was closing in. Air raid sirens in cities that had rarely heard them before became a stark reminder of this new reality. The attacks forced the Israeli Air Force to divert precious resources, including fighter jets and advanced air defense batteries like the Arrow system, to counter this emerging threat from the east. For the militias in Iraq, each successful launch was a major propaganda victory. They would quickly release videos of the launches, often set to dramatic music, broadcasting their actions across social media channels like Telegram. These videos served as proof of their capability and their commitment to the axis of resistance. They were designed to inspire followers, intimidate their enemies, and show the world that they were a force to be reckoned with. This campaign of fire launched from the deserts of Iraq was a clear and unambiguous message that the battlefield now stretched across the entire breadth of the Middle East. Faced with threats from Iraq, Israel opted for clandestine strikes, a strategy perfected over years. Using drones and intelligence, Israel allegedly struck militia targets inside Iraq, including commanders. Israel rarely confirms involvement, maintaining ambiguity. This keeps the conflict below all-out war but creates a dangerous cycle of violence, risking regional escalation. For the ordinary people of Iraq, it's a terrifying reality. They are trapped once again in a battle that is not of their making. The drones and missiles launched from their neighborhoods bring the war home, inviting devastating retaliation. Life is lived with a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. The presence of powerful militias creates a climate of fear and uncertainty. The central government is unable to protect its own citizens from the consequences of this shadow war. We are tired. Their fight is here, in our country. We are the ones who fear the response from the sky. We are the ones who pay the price for it. We are its hostages, trapped in our own homes. For Israelis, the current conflict has shattered a fundamental sense of security. The attacks from Iraq, Gaza, Lebanon, and Yemen have fostered a profound feeling of being encircled. While the country possesses one of the world's most advanced multi-layered air defense systems, no defense is perfect. The psychological toll is immense, stretching the definition of the battlefield across the entire region. The southern port city of Eilat has been transformed from a peaceful resort town into a frontline target. The attacks represent a direct assault not just on military targets but on the Israeli economy and the morale of its people. It serves as a constant, unnerving reminder that the axis of resistance can reach them from almost any direction. This new Eastern Front has a tangible impact on daily life far beyond the immediate targets. Beyond the physical destruction and the military maneuvers lie the unseen wounds of this conflict, the deep psychological scars left on millions of people. In both Israel and Iraq, entire generations are growing up in the shadow of perpetual war, their worldview shaped by fear, trauma, and animosity. For Iraqi youth, the constant instability and violence shatter any hope for a stable future, fueling disillusionment and making them vulnerable to recruitment by extremist groups who offer a sense of purpose and power. The endless cycle of conflict robs them of their childhood and their future, creating a legacy of anger that will fuel grievances for decades to come. In Israel, the psychological impact is just as profound. The feeling of being under constant siege from all sides has led to a hardening of attitudes and a rise in collective anxiety. The trauma of the October 7th attacks, compounded by the daily threat of missiles from multiple fronts, has left deep scars on the national psyche. Mental health services are overwhelmed as people struggle to cope with post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and loss. This persistent state of high alert erodes social trust and makes the prospect of a peaceful, negotiated solution to any of the region's conflicts feel more distant and more impossible than ever before. Hope becomes a casualty of war. This conflict also decimates the middle ground where peace could one day take root. The voices of moderation and coexistence in both societies are drowned out by the drums of war. In Iraq, those who call for disarming the militias and pursuing a path of neutrality are branded as traitors or cowards. In Israel, the political discourse shifts further to the right, with many seeing force as the only language their enemies understand. The space for dialogue, empathy, and mutual understanding shrinks with every missile fired and every retaliatory strike. The conflict reinforces the narratives of extremists on both sides, who thrive on chaos and division. Ultimately, the greatest human impact is the destruction of the future. The conflict consumes vast resources that could be spent on education, healthcare, and infrastructure. It perpetuates a cycle of violence where each generation inherits the hatreds of the last. It ensures that children in both Baghdad and Tel Aviv learn to see each other not as people, but as existential threats. This collapse of hope is perhaps the most tragic consequence of all, a wound that prevents healing and guarantees that the echoes of this war will continue to reverberate, stealing peace from generations yet to be born. The Middle East is balanced on a knife edge, and the volatile relationship between Israel and militias in Iraq could tip the region into a catastrophic war. A miscalculation by either side could trigger an uncontrollable chain reaction, potentially drawing Iran directly into the conflict. A direct war between Israel and Iran would inevitably be fought on the soil of Iraq and Syria. The future role of the United States will be critical in navigating this path, attempting to support Israel, protect its forces, and prevent a wider conflict. In the coming months, we must watch for key signals of escalation and monitor the rhetoric from leaders. The path ahead is fraught with danger, and actions taken will determine whether the region steps back from the brink or plunges into wider conflict. This is not a remote conflict. The escalating war has profound implications for the entire world, and to ignore it is to invite global instability. The most immediate risk is to the global economy. The Middle East remains the artery through which the world's oil and gas flows. A wider war would send energy prices skyrocketing, triggering a global recession. Furthermore, a major regional war would unleash a humanitarian catastrophe. This is why urgent diplomacy is the only viable path forward. The world cannot afford to be a passive spectator. Ultimately, we must care because the embers of one regional conflict can easily ignite a global fire.